commitments for the next 7 years, and making a lot of those commitments based on politics. A lot of those commitments are based on politics. Priorities of school boards are being totally ignored. We in this province, well, I'll tell you what ones I'm for, some of the ones I'm for, because the top of the school board list in my area involved 2 schools in my constituency that are not even mentioned in that 7 years. And the priorities have been totally ignored. We are going back in time to the old-time politics. We had 3 premiers in Nova Scotia who helped to move us away somewhat from the old system. And 2 of them, in fact, were Conservatives. One of them was Premier Donnie Cameron. You know, Premier Donnie Cameron tried to make a few changes. Premier Dr. Savage tried to make a few changes in the pork barrel system. And we had Dr. Ham, who actually was doing a lot of good in relationship to some areas, and he has a legacy which is being destroyed by an anti-Dr. Ham piece of legislation that is coming forward in a financial perspective. But we also have a government that has moved. Dr. Ham was involved with the promotion of Nova Scotia Business Inc. to take the politics out of the system to some degree. And here we have a government with cabinet approval being the order of the day in relationship to the Industrial Expansion Fund. Now, certainly in some areas there's a need for the Industrial Expansion Fund, but to pump so much money into the Industrial Expansion Fund and at the very same time almost creating a bit of competition with Nova Scotia Business Inc. to some degree. You know, I think we have had a return to the politics of the 1940s and 1950s with this government, and the people of Nova Scotia will remember what is going on in this province. Now, just on Tuesday of this week, I had a young constituent in my office who has been waiting for his EI since March the 4th. And I had my constituency send off a fax to me a few minutes ago just with a few examples. Just a few examples of what is happening in the EI spectrum. Last September, constituents were told by the EI office that they were 4 weeks behind with processing. And I could go through the list where it has developed. Last month, a constituent waited for 6 weeks from the time of the first filing before receiving any check, and there were no hitches or no problems with the claim. I believe this government should be dealing with its counterpart in Ottawa for the people of Nova Scotia. You know, job creation is something that my leader is putting forward in a manufacturing and processing tax credit. And the business community that I am dealing with is very, very concerned with what's happening in this province, and there is tremendous support for my leader in relationship to this manufacturing tax credit, which will in fact create jobs in Nova Scotia, and it will be done without the pork barrelism that has been occurring within the province.
Order, please. The chair recognizes the Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development.
I just wondered if the honourable member opposite will take question.
Will the honourable member from Pictou take a question?
No. Mr. Speaker, my time has expired, but And actually, the government is on its last breath as well.
Order, please. Order, please. The honourable member's time has expired. The chair now recognizes the honourable member from Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wasn't going to speak on this, but I guess by the looks of it here, I've got to. So. I would like to, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to start by getting into some of our resources and some of the economic problems that we have there. And I want to start with one that's certainly dear to my heart and to my family, and that's our lobster fishery in this province. And I want to go back a ways to start this. I want to go back to 1999. That was 10 years ago when the Supreme Court made a ruling in this country, and the problem started financially then by DFO, Department of Fisheries and Oceans. And I'm going to get into how the province hasn't really helped out here in this situation. And if we don't, we're going to see one of the major fisheries in this province. I'm not sure where it's going to go. If I could predict that, well, maybe I wouldn't be here. But 1999 decision was made for DFO was given a mandate to get the Aboriginal fishermen into the fishery. So they started trying to buy up the licenses and couldn't, the enterprises. So they had to start jacking up the prices of the enterprises, the boats and licenses, to get a hold of them, to satisfy that Supreme Court ruling. And things were good. Things were good. The market was good, fairly good. The fishery was fairly good. The fishery still is fairly good, but now the problem has come into the market. Some of these young fellers in the past 6, 7 years have paid $1 million to get into this fishery. And last fall, we seen what happened. We seen what happened in the fishery. We seen what happened to a lot of things. But into the fishery, the price went right in half on them to what them young people had, them young men had planned for. On a $6 lobster, they could pay for $1 million rig if they had the time enough to do it. That went into half on them, Mr. Speaker, last year. And I'm not sure whether it was the market, or I'm not too sure whether it was a lot of propaganda. But I do know one thing for a fact, that the financial officer of a big company in this province just stated 3 weeks ago, and I have that, and I could find it and table it if need be, that they would have had bigger problems in that company if they hadn't have got all the cheap lobsters they bought in the fall of the year. I'll leave that there, and you can make your own decision out of that. So we have the buyers working against the fishery too. I don't know why. I've got theories, but I won't get into that. So you got a lot of young fishermen. You got 10 or 15% of them around this coast that are on the verge of bankruptcy right now. When you go down through my riding, I know every one of them, and a lot of them's got their homes for sale. And they got their half-ton truck parked out to the end of the driveway with for sale signs on them. That's going on right today, right now. I know for a fact. They've gone to the banks. Some of them's gone to the banks. Some's through the loan board. 20-some% through the loan board. 30% is through the banks of this country. So over the half of the fleet is in debt. Huge debt, some of them. The loan board has eased up. The loan board helped them out this year by forgiving some loans. And also the loan board is going to help the young people to get into this by long-term loans. And that's kind of good, but I'll get into that a little bit later. The banks are refusing to work with some of these young people. Give me your money or else. That's what's going on. So you got some of the young fellas down there with the crews leaving them because there was no money into it. So you got them starting to tie one of the boats up and one crew going aboard one boat. They're going to try to pay for these rigs. Now the loan board was good. The loan board, we come out with a thing here, the minister did, by letting young people get into this and giving them long-term to buy. But what about that 20 to 50% that get into this since the Marshall decision that has $1 million debt over their head? Who's going to help them? I wrote to the Minister of Fisheries of this country, and the reply back in a letter was, "We're concerned." That's what they said. They was concerned. That's all I got, nothing more. So how are we going to stop this bankruptcy from happening in the lobster fishery that's coming on? And it's coming. It's coming. I stood in this house last May, right here, and I told you it was coming. Told you a lot of things was coming. And it's coming true, and there's worse coming yet. And I guarantee it. We haven't seen nothing yet to what we're going to see. So I'm not sure who's going to help these young fishermen get through this. I'm not sure how it's going to happen. I know they're scrambling. I know that they're even breaking the law, some of them. It's happening. And it's going to get worse. And I don't know what it's going to do to the industry. I know what it's doing to the coastal communities. The crews are walking away now. They was going to Alberta. I think that stopped. So you're going to see worse. You're going to see more of them coming back here to these coastal communities. Not sure what for, but they're going to come back. In the clamming industry down there, we got a problem. We got a $9 million industry down there in that little area that's been cut in half this past year. For 2 years, year and a half, there's been an overflow of a sewer down there that nobody seems to want to fix. I'm not sure why, but that's cut that completely in half, that fishery, because when it rains, they shut the beaches down because of overflow. So there they got to wait 6 or 7 or 8 days. Somebody to do a test on them, they can get them to do it. I mean, these things, why are we letting something like this happen? I mean, you got it in the forestry down there. Here's all the trees cut off. You got the forestry setting. The forest workers are out of work. They're all out of work. The farmers, they're paying double for the fertilizer this year to what they normally pay. I mean, I'm not sure about the answers to anything, but I know there's problems, and I know they're going to get bigger if we don't work to try to fix them. And the biggest one's going to be in that lobster fishery around this coast. You got a $500 million industry, and half of it's going to go under. Now, I'm not sure where it's going to go, but it's going under, because them young fellers cannot handle the debt that they've got alone. Anyway, Mr. Speaker, with that, I'll close. I was going to get into the debt, and why this problem should be going into $1 billion or 1.4 more billion dollars in debt, when I have people from financial institutes telling me the best thing you can do in hard times is try to get out of debt, and you'll survive it. If there's stimulus money got to come into these provinces of this country, maybe the federal government better ante up the works. With that, I'll take my seat. Thank you.
Thank you. The chair now recognizes the Honourable Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, it is with mixed emotions that I rise today to speak on the very important talk of Nova Scotia's economy. Mr. Speaker, there are some preliminary plans. This government recognizes that things are needed to be done to stimulate the economy, and we have a plan to do that. And it's very interesting, Mr. Speaker, to hear the member from Pictou East stand up there and say that, along with his colleagues, that the loan to Northern Pulp from the Industrial Expansion Fund of $15 million, which is keeping people in the constituency of Pictou East and Pictou West and Pictou Centre, is pork barrel politics. Now, I hope if he ever gets to the door, he will look at them and he's going to say the same thing. And you know, not only that, I did a real service, because last year I voted against the single largest loan to the fishing industry in over 60 years when he voted against the budget, as did the member from Shelburne and the member from Pictou West. Mr. Speaker, you know, and yet they will stand on their feet and say, we have the answers to the economy. Mr. Speaker, you know as well as I do that they are not to be trusted with the economy of this province. Mr. Speaker, let me say the other thing, Mr. Speaker. This morning, we had in the Red Room a very good announcement from the federal government. It was stimulus money from the federal government, because then the provincial government was going to have to partner in that. You know, and I look on that side of the House, and I see the member from Halifax Citadel, Sable Island, who has 4 universities in his constituency, saying that he is going to vote against stimulus money for universities. Mr. Speaker, I see the representative for Halifax Needham and Halifax Chebucto, and I don't know which one has the Lead Street Community College in their constituency. It's one of the 2 of them. It's Needham. And she stands up on her feet and says she is not going to vote to support community colleges in this province. Mr. Speaker, I'm really kind of at a loss to see the logic of this. Mr. Speaker, we also, and I said it today probably in a way which probably the Speaker did say wasn't really appropriate, but, you know, we have a budget which is intended, a large part of that budget is intended to help Nova Scotia through this relatively slow period of the economy and get us back to normal. Well, you know, as one of my colleagues said today, Economics 1, Economics 2, and Economics 3, and Economics 4, they say if the private sector is not in a position to keep things moving, then it is probably the responsibility of the government to step in. Mr. Speaker, we are a government who wants to step in, but the opposition at this particular point refuses to allow us to present our plan to the people. Mr. Speaker, we have included in our budget, Mr. Speaker, the finance critic for the official opposition says table it on Monday. Look, I want to tell you, and I will tell the member from Digby Annapolis down there, you go to your leader, and you go to your leader, and you say you work with our leader and our House leader. We are quite prepared to table that budget on Monday. And I challenge you, allow us to table the budget on Monday. You want to see it? We want to show it. All you have to do is get together. You know, the honourable member from Richmond talks about House rules. But I'm sure more of you are more astute parliamentarians than I am. Despite having been in this House for 11 years, I'm not really one to ask about the rules. But I do know that if everybody consents, you can do it.
Jamie, why don't you let the leaders respond to your offer?
Yeah.
Offer to sit down.
And I would, you know, I hope the leaders would respond to the offer. Now, one of the other things, Mr. Speaker, that I would like to mention to you, and it has to do with the stimulus package, and they say, well, it's not good economics at this time to add to the debt. Now, I just want, and I don't like to, here's the member from Halifax Citadel refused to support universities. Mr. Speaker, our debt, as I said this morning, is a little bit more than $12 billion. But one of the things that the members of this House should understand, and I think they do, is that we also have an infrastructure deficit of around $8 billion. You know, so if you add up what we owe somebody and what we ought to do, you get up to about $20 billion. Now, Mr. Speaker, we were committed or prepared, and we've said this publicly, as a stimulus package to attack the infrastructure deficit to contribute $4 billion. Now, at the same time, the stimulus package, which would be contributing to the infrastructure deficit, you put money to correct that infrastructure deficit, you are diminishing the liability for that. Is that right? Everybody nods their head, yes. So we put $1.9 billion, $1.9 billion against that $8 billion infrastructure deficit, and at the end of a 2-year period, 3-year stimulus package, we got a $6.1 billion infrastructure deficit. We also have, at the same time, increased the debt from 12 to about $13.1 billion. Now, Mr. Speaker, the current debt that we have, if you add together the infrastructure debt and the actual dollar debt, is about $20 billion. Mr. Speaker, at the end of 3 years, if we get that money from the federal government, our bet is going to be $500 million. It's going less than that. It's going to be $19.5 billion. So, Mr. Speaker, just look at the numbers. It is false economy. If you don't want to look at it, is not to go to the federal government and accept that infrastructure money, Mr. Speaker. Now, in addition, as the Premier has said, the Minister of Economic and Rural Development have said, and some of my other colleagues have said in debate and in answer to questions today, the stimulus package over a 3-year period is supposed to put about 20,000 people either back to work or create new jobs. Now, Mr. Speaker, the fact that the other two parties at this time will not allow us to table a budget would indicate to me very clear that they are against the creation or the maintenance of 20,000 jobs in a sluggish economy. Now, Mr. Speaker, you tell me that that is responsible. I will challenge them. Listen, Mr. Speaker, if one of the members from the New Democratic Party and one of the members from the Liberal Party would like to stand on their feet and tell me that they will go back to their leaders and say they will allow us to bring in the budget concurrently with the change to the Financial Measures Act, we will. You know, Mr. Speaker, I'm quite happy to say that, to do that, and I challenge them to do that, but they won't do it because they know that we have a good plan. They can't handle the truth, Jake. They can't handle the truth. Now, Mr. Speaker, in terms of our plan to stimulate the economy, it was not only the road builders, who I think my colleague in Economic and Rural Development said that if the stimulus package was not passed, one company, 700 jobs, 700 people would not go back to work. 700 people would not go back to work. We have an organization like the Halifax Board of Trade saying, pass the budget, and get the stimulus package going. Mr. Speaker, even the editorial in the Herald today, and as people know that sometimes I would say in recent months, occasionally there have been comments in the Herald that have not been particularly complimentary to the government, but I want to read just a couple of paragraphs. Premier Rodney MacDonald is right about one thing. There is real public interest in getting a provincial budget passed so capital spending can flow to the weakened economy before more of the construction season is lost. Nor is it good for the economy or employment right now to have public works tenders and commitments shut down by an election. Mr. Speaker, The best economic policy is to keep the infrastructure spending flowing, which means getting at least one of the opposition parties to support a budget. Mr. Speaker, we have to get this stimulus out there. We need the cooperation of one of the other parties. And at least allow us to table the budget so you can see our plan and we can present the plan to the people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Time has expired for this emergency debate this evening. I want to thank all the honourable members for having taken part in this emergency debate. The motion for adjournment was made earlier. The House will rise to sit again tomorrow at 9 a.m. The House stands adjourned.